Mistress destroyed millionaire husband's family, but pregnant wife's return changed everything. No one foresaw how easily wealth, ambition, and forbidden passion could entangle to destroy a once perfect marriage. A single spark of betrayal was all it took for speculation to become undeniable truth, scandalizing the affluent circles of Los Angeles. At the center stood a millionaire whose empire stretched from Beverly Hills to Dubai, confronted by haunting accusations that shattered trust within the walls of his lavish estate. Even close friends whispered in hushed tones for fear of fueling the growing rumor mill. Still, in the darkest hour, a pregnant wife's unannounced return carried the power to rewrite destiny or obliterate it completely. Jonathan Green appeared destined for success from the moment he set foot in the world. Born in a modest suburb of Houston, Texas, he witnessed struggle and resilience up close. His father, Marcus Green, was a Vietnam veteran who worked multiple jobs after returning stateside, determined that his children would have better futures. Jonathan's mother, Linda, juggled a graveyard shift at the local hospital, saving every penny she could to keep the family afloat. While Jonathan grew up with hand-me-downs and rationed groceries, there was no shortage of love. Marcus and Linda devoted themselves to ensuring he received an education, something neither had completed themselves. From an early age, Jonathan dazzled his teachers with remarkable aptitude, particularly in business and mathematics. He felt drawn to the idea of entrepreneurship, observing with keen interest whenever small businesses around town opened their doors. On weekends, he devoured biographies of business titans, Sam Walton, Steve Jobs, Oprah Winfrey, individuals who rose from adversity to transform entire industries. His life took a pivotal turn in his high school's final year. While awaiting college admissions results, Jonathan entered a statewide entrepreneurial pitch competition. He created a business plan for a community-centric fitness center, offering not just workout equipment but also childcare, nutritional advice, and counseling services. This approach was radical for the time, blending social outreach and profit-based enterprise. He didn't win first place. However, a local real estate investor named Mark Johnson, who was on the judging panel, noticed the strength of Jonathan's ideas and offered him a mentorship opportunity. By the time Jonathan graduated from the University of Texas with honors, he had already launched a small personal training business in Austin. It struggled through the early days. He often ate instant noodles to save on expenses, but grit became his ally. Within 2 years, he secured enough savings and small investments to open Green's Wellness, a full-fledged gym that rapidly attracted clientele. Buoyed by local success, Jonathan expanded, forging partnerships with nutrition experts and mental health counselors. In an era of hyper-competitive fitness chains, his distinctive holistic approach carved out a niche market. Yet, while his professional star rose, it was his personal life that gave him unwavering purpose. He had started dating Catherine Taylor in college, drawn to her warmth, empathy, and quiet intelligence. Catherine had grown up in a middle-class household in San Diego, where her father taught high school literature and her mother worked as a freelance artist. She had inherited her father's love for reading, which endowed her with a soft-spoken wisdom that balanced Jonathan's ambition perfectly. Their relationship was solid, built on deep mutual respect. She offered him stability when his boundless drive sometimes threatened to overshoot practicality. They married soon after Jonathan expanded to a second gym. The wedding itself was small, a gathering of close friends and family on the outskirts of Austin. Mark Johnson, the investor who had first spotted Jonathan's potential, was there to witness the union. Within a few years, Jonathan's endeavors evolved into a multi-state chain of fitness centers stretching from Texas to Colorado. Articles in business journals lauded Green's wellness as a model for the future of integrated fitness, praising its combination of high-end equipment, mental health resources, and child-friendly zones. Nevertheless, with success came new temptations. Jonathan was traveling more frequently, forging alliances with major investors, exploring expansions, and meeting people who existed in spheres of greater wealth and influence than he'd previously known. Catherine supported him wholeheartedly, though deep down she hoped for a time when he would slow down enough to savor life alongside her. By the time Jonathan hit his 30s, his chain of integrated fitness centers was valued at over $200 million. He and Catherine relocated to Beverly Hills. Nestled in the canyons overlooking Los Angeles, their Spanish-style estate boasted 10 bedrooms, a sprawling garden, and a lavish outdoor pool that had once been featured in a home design magazine. That same year, Catherine gave birth to their son, Henry. Despite her exhaustion, Catherine glowed with maternal fulfillment, fervently hoping that this arrival would encourage Jonathan to take a step back from his non-stop lifestyle. But ambition never loosened its grip on Jonathan. New expansions beckoned, a set of boutique gyms on the East Coast, partnerships with wellness bloggers in Europe, and even the possibility of going public. Conferences, corporate events, and exclusive parties soon dominated Jonathan's schedule. Catherine adapted in the beginning. She managed the household, curated philanthropic events, and cultivated a supportive environment for Henry. The shift in their marriage was subtle. Instead of gazing lovingly into each other's eyes at dinner, they found themselves constantly checking phones or discussing business strategies between bites. Catherine took pride in her role. She believed wholeheartedly in Jonathan's dream and wanted him to achieve greatness. There were fleeting, tender moments, Henry's bedtime rituals, holiday getaways to Hawaii, or spontaneous date nights. But such intervals grew increasingly rare. Finally, Catherine summoned the courage to address her concerns. One evening, after Henry's first birthday party, she confessed her fears of drifting apart. Jonathan listened earnestly, recognizing the truth in her words. He promised to spend fewer nights at corporate dinners, fewer weekends at exclusive golf outings with potential investors. For a short while, it worked. He was more present, more affectionate. Catherine harbored cautious optimism that their relationship would withstand the pressures of growing wealth and business commitments. At the beginning of Jonathan's push into the international market, he needed a potent legal mind to navigate the complexities. His usual team had served him well, but each new country's regulations were a labyrinth. That was when Mark Johnson, who remained his trusted advisor, recommended an exceptional young attorney named Bianca Street James. Bianca, only in her late 20s, had a striking reputation in corporate law circles. She had attended Harvard Law on scholarship, dazzled her professors, and leapfrogged from a junior associate to partner in record time at a revered Los Angeles firm. The first meeting took place in a newly leased conference room at a glossy high-rise in Century City. Catherine was not present, busy with Henry at home. Jonathan sat across from a woman with raven black hair tied in a sleek bun, a crisp designer blazer, and a remarkable poise that belied her relatively young age. She spoke with quiet confidence, articulating a vision for how to protect Jonathan's interests abroad, structure licensing agreements, and handle shareholder expansions if he ever decided to go public. There was no immediate, obvious spark of romantic tension. Rather, Jonathan was impressed by her intellect and composure. Over the next few months, Bianca became indispensable to the company. She outlined global compliance roadmaps, streamlined existing legal frameworks, and deftly mediated disputes among potential partners. Jonathan often praised her intuitive brilliance, convinced she was a linchpin for his company's future success. Catherine heard about Bianca though only in the context of Jonathan's legal expansions. She was pleased that her husband had found someone competent to lighten his load. However, at social gatherings, certain whispers circulated Bianca was known to be alluring, a lawyer whose charm extended beyond the courtroom. Several acquaintances teased Jonathan half-jokingly about being careful around such a captivating professional. He brushed off the suggestions, claiming that nothing overshadowed his devotion to Catherine. Bianca's involvement grew deeper. She began traveling with Jonathan for critical negotiations in New York, London, and later Dubai, where a potential joint venture with Middle Eastern investors promised unimaginable returns. Catherine found it odd that her husband's previously sporadic text messages became even more irregular. When she asked him about it, Jonathan insisted the workload tripled once foreign backers entered the picture. He was quick to dismiss any suggestion of impropriety, reaffirming his love for Catherine and Henry. But Catherine's unease only heightened when Jonathan didn't return home for Henry's second birthday. She had arranged a small celebration, expecting Jonathan's flight to land that afternoon. A last-minute negotiation crisis in Dubai derailed his plans. He FaceTimed Henry from a sterile hotel lobby, apologizing repeatedly, promising to make it up to them. Catherine forced a smile in front of Henry. After the call, she locked herself in the bedroom to cry. This was the first major milestone Jonathan had missed, and the sting of disappointment was profound. Bianca's existence loomed larger in Catherine's mind. During that same period, she began seeing more pictures of Jonathan in tabloids, rubbing shoulders with celebrities, attending black tie events in European capitals, often with a woman by his side who could only be Bianca. Although Catherine tried to reassure herself that these appearances were purely business, doubt seeped in. She had never seen Jonathan look so vibrant and engaged in photos, as though a new passion fueled him. Could it be the excitement of the big deals? Or was it something or someone else? What started innocently late dinners in foreign locales, intense strategy sessions that stretched into the early hours, slipped into uncharted territory. One fateful night in Paris, Jonathan and Bianca were celebrating a successful meeting with potential partners. A wave of relief and exhilaration pulsed through Jonathan as they sealed a deal believed to be worth over $100 million. After multiple glasses of wine at a Michelin-starred restaurant, they wandered along the Seine. Paris at night felt dreamlike. The city glimmered with romance. Conversation turned personal, weaving between stories of their past struggles and the pressures they each faced. By midnight, the tension was palpable. Jonathan felt both liberated and weighed down freedom from the constant hustle of American boardrooms, yet guilt for the attraction he sensed. A part of him recognized the boundary he was about to cross, but reason slipped away in the face of intoxication and Bianca's unwavering admiration. Beneath a flickering street lamp, they kissed, a fleeting moment laced with both passion and foreboding. That one slip became a pivotal turning point. Jonathan told himself it was a mistake, a drunken lapse in judgment, but as days turned into weeks, the emotional intimacy with Bianca deepened. Their phone calls stretched from legal briefs into personal confessions. Their text messages carried subtle suggestions of longing. A secret room in Jonathan's heart formed, one that Catherine neither knew nor had access to. At first, Jonathan's guilt made him more attentive when he returned to Beverly Hills. He lavished Catherine with extravagant gifts, handcrafted jewelry, designer bags, limited edition perfumes. He redoubled his involvement at home, cooking dinner for her and Henry on a few occasions. Yet, these abrupt gestures felt performative to Catherine. She appreciated the attention but couldn't shake a sense of something lurking beneath the surface. Multiple times, Catherine found Jonathan's phone locked tight, placed face-down practices that were new. Before, Jonathan had nothing to hide. She could pick up his phone freely if it rang. Now he clutched it, reacting nervously whenever she glanced toward it. Late-night text alerts, suspicious disclaimers about time zone differences, and occasional hushed phone conversations behind closed doors all fueled Catherine's anxiety. She tried asking him directly. Jonathan denied any wrongdoing, explaining away his secrecy as a necessity for high-stakes negotiations. Catherine, wanting to trust her husband, tried to subdue her mounting worries. She told herself that working with international investors necessitated confidentiality. Still, the uneasy whispers in her mind refused to be silenced. During an unseasonably chilly Los Angeles winter, Catherine fell ill with a severe flu. She was confined to bed, feverish and weak, while Henry stayed with Catherine's mother in San Diego to avoid catching the virus. Rather than remain by her side, Jonathan claimed a crucial meeting in Toronto demanded his presence. Catherine felt abandoned. She needed him at home, but he departed anyway, with Bianca naturally accompanying him. Catherine spent lonely days recovering in the quiet house, feeling her husband drift further. Upon his return, Jonathan was distant, as though his mind still floated somewhere in the realm of business deals and clandestine longing. Catherine decided they needed to speak to a marriage counselor, suspecting that their unaddressed issues had grown too large to handle alone. Jonathan, surprisingly, agreed. He recognized that Catherine was not wrong about their emotional gulf. In the early sessions, they tiptoed around the real cause Jonathan's affair with Bianca. He rationalized his distance by citing overwork and the pressure of massive expansions. Catherine tearfully admitted feeling pushed aside and unsupported. The counselor urged Jonathan to re-examine his priorities, but the sessions only scraped the surface. Jonathan dreaded the idea of losing Catherine or hurting Henry, yet he couldn't bring himself to sever ties with Bianca, who had burrowed deep into his psyche. One evening, Catherine received a phone call from an unknown number. A woman's voice, calm yet laced with urgency, declared she had proof. Jonathan was having an affair. Catherine's heart pounded, her mind reeling. She tried to maintain composure, demanding to know who was calling. The person refused to identify herself, only saying she was an insider who disliked how Bianca manipulated men in positions of power. Sure enough, an email arrived shortly afterward containing photos of Jonathan and Bianca stepping out of an upscale London hotel, locked in an unmistakably intimate embrace. Captions pointed out the date when Jonathan had told Catherine he was stuck in overnight business meetings. Additional images showed them having dinner alone at a dimly lit table, leaning across a candle to share a tender moment. Stomach churning, Catherine realized that her worst suspicions paled compared to the harsh reality. Rage and heartbreak consumed her. She confronted Jonathan immediately. Forced to see photographic evidence, he could no longer hide behind clever words. He fell silent at first, then stuttered through apologetic pleas. Catherine, tears in her eyes, demanded the full truth. Between sobs, Jonathan confessed that he felt trapped by the affair but unable to stop. He swore he still loved Catherine and was ashamed of what he had done. He promised to end it now. But Catherine's fury knew no bounds. She yelled at him for the lies, for stealing precious moments away from Henry, for humiliating her before the entire city, maybe even the entire world. Once gossip spread. In a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, Jonathan offered to cut ties with Bianca professionally and personally. Catherine, reeling from betrayal, demanded separation until he proved his sincerity. She moved to a suite at a nearby luxury hotel with Henry, leaving the estate that same night. Rumors of Jonathan's infidelity soon trickled into the business world. Certain shareholders questioned if the scandal might undermine the brand's wholesome reputation. Mark Johnson confronted Jonathan, disappointed that he had jeopardized not only his marriage but potentially his entire corporate legacy. Bianca, however, was not content to vanish without a fight. She had invested her skills in Green's wellness, forging alliances with key international investors. She insinuated she deserved more compensation or an elevated role in the corporate structure as a reward for her contributions. Jonathan found himself cornered. He wanted Bianca out of his life, but she threatened to reveal damaging details of the shortcuts and borderline unethical deals he had authorized to ensure swift overseas expansions. If she went public with proof, legal actions and financial ruin could follow. Panicked, Jonathan tried to placate her, offering hush money or a position in a separate venture. Bianca refused, hinting that she wanted a far bigger piece of his business and possibly him officially. Meanwhile, Catherine, still reeling from betrayal, lived in limbo. She sought the counsel of attorneys, uncertain if she should file for divorce. She also visited a therapist who specialized in marital trauma. Henry, barely 3 years old, sensed the tension. Catherine felt torn between rage at Jonathan's betrayal and a deep-seated desire to preserve her family. Despite everything, she couldn't deny that she loved the man who once shared her dreams. In the midst of this emotional maelstrom, Catherine began feeling unwell nausea, lightheadedness, exhaustion. Initially, she chalked it up to stress. But as days turned to weeks, she decided to buy a pregnancy test. The result was positive. Catherine's emotions churned in a storm of shock, fear, and a glimmer of joy. Another child was on the way, conceived before she learned of Jonathan's affair. Conflicted, she considered hiding the pregnancy, at least temporarily. She wasn't sure if Jonathan deserved to know, given the heartbreak he caused. Yet she also recognized the child's right to a father. Ultimately, she called him, voice trembling, and shared the news. Jonathan was stunned into silence. Then a wave of relief or happiness came through. He said he wanted to be fully present this time, that he'd do whatever it took to mend the damage. Catherine felt uncertain, but part of her wanted to believe him. Catherine's pregnancy forced Jonathan to accelerate his efforts to extricate Bianca from his life. Yet, Bianca sensed Jonathan's panic. Leveraging it to her advantage, she demanded an official statement presenting her as a critical legal partner in Green's wellness for years to come. She let slip that she had in her possession emails, recorded calls, and financial documents implicating Jonathan in unethical expansions. If he didn't comply, she would systematically release them to the authorities, tarnishing both his personal and professional reputations. Feeling trapped, Jonathan attempted to gather his loyal allies within the company. He organized clandestine meetings with Mark Johnson and other sympathetic investors, laying out Bianca's blackmail. They concluded that the only way to remove Bianca's leverage was to build a stronger case against her evidence of her own misdeeds. After all, Bianca wasn't exactly innocent. She had orchestrated certain deals that skirted international laws. If they could prove her complicity, they might neutralize her threat. While Jonathan orchestrated these behind-the-scenes maneuvers, Catherine's maternal instincts outweighed her anger. She began contacting private investigators, hoping to compile information about Bianca's background. Catherine discovered that Bianca had a history of entangling herself with wealthy, influential men who advanced her career. No previous case had garnered as much attention or gone public, but whispers implied she'd always exit. These liaisons significantly richer. Catherine shared her findings with Jonathan and Mark Johnson, galvanizing them to push forward with a plan. Despite a flicker of hope that Jonathan might overcome the crisis, Catherine grew overwhelmed. With each passing day, tabloids circled like vultures, broadcasting rumors about an illicit affair and $1 million mistress. Determined to shield Henry, Catherine left Beverly Hills and returned to her parents' home in San Diego, where she could find emotional support. She believed distance might offer clarity. Jonathan promised to visit on weekends, but business and the Bianca quagmire often demanded his time. In San Diego, Catherine experienced a quieter routine. She joined a prenatal yoga class, something she never did when pregnant with Henry. She reconnected with old friends who reminded her of the self she had been before wealth consumed her life. Nevertheless, heartbreak lingered in every quiet moment. She missed the partner she once had. She felt abandoned, carrying the heavy weight of a child whose father might not be present in the ways she had imagined. Jonathan attempted to contact Catherine daily, though she frequently ignored his calls. He sent gifts, flowers, letters, even a new car. Catherine accepted none of it, stating that she wanted meaningful changes, not material distractions. The separation loomed over Jonathan like a penance. He recognized how drastically he had failed Catherine and Henry, how he'd let his hunger for success overshadow vows of loyalty. The investigation into Bianca's wrongdoing progressed slower than Jonathan would have liked. Fear gnawed at him every night, the dread that Bianca might leak incriminating files, or worse, reveal personal photos of them together. He knew the scandal could obliterate the goodwill he had built over a decade, leaving him penniless and disgraced. Eventually, Jonathan mustered the courage to propose a direct confrontation. He convened a meeting at a private villa in Malibu, inviting Bianca, Mark Johnson, and several key investors. The goal was to orchestrate Bianca's exit on negotiated terms, money, references, while protecting the company. Bianca arrived with a smirk, clearly ready to demand the moon in exchange for her silence. But Mark Johnson launched the meeting by reading out a list of transactions that tied Bianca to potential money laundering, shell companies, and more. Her face blanched. She realized they had gathered substantial evidence. Blackmailing Jonathan wasn't going to be as straightforward as she expected. Rather than concede immediately, Bianca stormed out, threatening to retaliate in ways none of them could imagine. Fearful of how far Bianca might go, Jonathan drove to San Diego. Catherine's father, Joseph Taylor, greeted him at the doorstep with a pained expression, reminding Jonathan of the heartbreak he had inflicted. Nonetheless, Catherine agreed to see him. Over tea in the living room, Jonathan poured out his anguish. He explained how he was working to sever Bianca's hold, how regrets consumed him night and day, how he wanted to earn Catherine's trust once more. Catherine listened quietly, tears brimming. Their conversation stretched into late evening. For the first time in months, Catherine felt Jonathan speak from the heart, not from a place of guilt or damage control. She agreed to return to Los Angeles under one condition: he would arrange for a comprehensive therapy approach, joint marriage counseling, personal counseling for himself, and a plan to ensure the unborn child would never experience the turmoil Henry did. Jonathan, tears in his eyes, vowed to do everything necessary. With her second pregnancy entering its second trimester, Catherine traveled back to Beverly Hills. The estate felt haunted by old memories, yet Jonathan made tangible changes. He relocated corporate functions away from home. He handed more responsibilities to trusted executives, reducing the frantic pace that once consumed him. True to his promise, he engaged with a renowned therapist specializing in high-profile marital conflicts. Catherine and Jonathan resumed counseling, this time tackling the affair head-on. Sessions were emotionally charged. Catherine revealed how deeply the betrayal cut her, how the illusions of their perfect family disintegrated overnight. Jonathan faced the ugliness of his choices, the emptiness in him that no amount of money or success had been able to fill. Slowly, the rawness they had avoided addressing was exposed, and they set about clearing the rubble to reconstruct whatever was left. Just as Jonathan and Catherine began moving toward a semblance of stability, Bianca launched her final strike. An anonymous blog appeared online, detailing Jonathan's private expansions, painting him as a ruthless entrepreneur who'd engaged in hush-money deals, bribery, and even insider trading. The blog included screenshots of questionable emails, some real, some possibly fabricated. The mainstream press latched onto the sensational headlines: Green's wellness empire in turmoil, billionaires' illicit deals exposed. Jonathan spent sleepless nights meeting with crisis management teams, issuing statements and cooperating with authorities to prove his innocence. Catherine felt the stress weigh on her, convinced the unborn child absorbed every morsel of tension. If not for the newly rebuilt emotional rapport with Jonathan, she might have fled again. Yet she stayed, standing beside him at press conferences, portraying a united front. Privately, Catherine wept at the unrelenting barrage, questioning if peace would ever come. On the legal front, Mark Johnson's team worked feverishly, producing evidence that discredited many of the allegations. Where Jonathan had made borderline ethical choices, they uncovered mitigating circumstances or highlighted Bianca's complicit role. Their strategy was to shift blame onto Bianca for orchestrating the unscrupulous expansions. Some legal experts believed the plan might hold up in court, especially if they proved blackmail. A stroke of unexpected fortune arrived when a former associate of Bianca's came forward, prepared to testify that Bianca manipulated documents and orchestrated questionable deals. This gave Jonathan's legal team the ammunition they needed. Bianca, sensing the tides turning, tried to broker a deal. She would retract the blog, release a statement clearing Jonathan, and vanish from the corporate scene if Jonathan agreed to an 8-figure payoff. Instead, Jonathan's lawyers, along with local authorities, filed a lawsuit against Bianca, alleging embezzlement, fraud, and defamation. The lawsuit was accompanied by a restraining order preventing Bianca from approaching Jonathan or Catherine. The news shook the legal community as Bianca's once meteoric rise now plummeted in a swirl of scandal. She faced the real possibility of losing her law license and enduring a criminal investigation. With Bianca legally cornered, Jonathan's business stabilized gradually. Some investors were wary, but the brand still held strong. Jonathan held a press conference, acknowledging mistakes and vowing stricter oversight. He expressed gratitude for Catherine's support in a heartfelt speech. While cynics dismissed it as damage control, those close to the family saw genuine contrition. Meanwhile, Catherine's pregnancy advanced to its final trimester. She and Jonathan inched closer to a place of renewed intimacy. Trust, however, was fragile. Catherine insisted on open discussions about Jonathan's regrets, fears, and the personal demons that led him astray. Jonathan, for his part, showed unprecedented vulnerability, revealing how a relentless drive to succeed sometimes masked deeper insecurities. Counselor sessions shifted from resentment-laden blame to exploring ways they could forge a healthier partnership. Henry, now nearing 4, sensed the warmer atmosphere at home. He cuddled more easily with both parents. Catherine, waddling with her growing belly, often read bedtime stories while Jonathan listened in. The family started hosting modest dinners, reintegrating themselves into social circles while emphasizing simpler joys, quality time, laughter, emotional transparency. During one of these evenings, Mark Johnson joined them for dinner. Over a glass of red wine, he reminisced about discovering Jonathan's talents during that long-ago high school pitch contest. He told Catherine that even then, he sensed Jonathan's potential for greatness. But Mark also noted that ambition without wisdom could be destructive, an echo of everything that had transpired. Jonathan, who once bristled at paternal lectures, accepted Mark's words with humility. After dinner, Catherine and Mark shared a private conversation in the garden. Mark, paternal in tone, thanked Catherine for returning. He believed that her unwavering loyalty would be the saving grace for Jonathan. Catherine admitted she harbored resentment, yet clung to hope that her marriage could evolve into something stronger and more authentic. Mark parted that night, confident he had witnessed the seeds of genuine healing. In the final month of Catherine's pregnancy, tension hovered. The memory of how Jonathan missed Henry's earlier milestones weighed heavily on him, intensifying his resolve to be present for this birth. When Catherine's contractions began late one evening, Jonathan was by her side. They rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. Hours of labor followed, culminating in the early morning cry of a baby girl whom they named Emma Elizabeth Green. The moment Jonathan cut the umbilical cord, tears streamed down his cheeks. For Catherine, exhaustion intermingled with relief and a cautious sense of renewal. She saw Jonathan cradle Emma with trembling arms, voice filled with wonder. Family visited, congratulating them on a healthy newborn. The atmosphere felt surreal less than a year prior. Scandal threatened to tear them apart. Yet here they were, forging new memories within the same domain of wealth and paparazzi-laden streets. Although Emma's birth brought light, the Bianca scandal continued in the background. A preliminary hearing loomed where Bianca faced serious charges. Jonathan and Catherine dreaded the possibility of testifying, but their attorneys insisted it might be necessary. The media, still enthralled by the billionaire's scandalous affair, occasionally snapped photos of Jonathan entering the courthouse for pre-trial discussions. In a twist that spared the couple further public scrutiny, Bianca's attorneys negotiated a plea deal. She admitted partial responsibility for the false blog posts and leaked documents in exchange for reduced charges. Ultimately, Bianca lost her law license and faced a hefty fine, but avoided lengthy jail time. She left Los Angeles soon after, her reputation in shambles. For Jonathan and Catherine, closure arrived not through vengeance, but through Bianca's final disappearance from through life. The weeks after Emma's arrival were a whirlwind of late-night feedings, diaper changes, and Henry's early attempts at big brother interactions. Catherine and Jonathan discovered a joint joy in the mundane aspects of parenting things, once overshadowed by extravagant wealth. Jonathan would lull Emma to sleep at 3 a.m, hum lullabies, and reflect on how swiftly he had nearly destroyed such a precious gift. In therapy, they recognized that illusions of perfection had set them on a dangerous path. Jonathan's unstoppable ambition, combined with Catherine's willingness to remain in the background, created space for unaddressed emotional needs. A slow, methodical rebuilding of trust became their priority, one anchored in daily transparency, shared schedules, open finances, heartfelt conversations about insecurities. Still, Catherine felt occasional pangs of suspicion whenever Jonathan had late meetings. She overcame them through honest dialogue. Jonathan, in turn, needed constant reassurance that Catherine was truly committed to forgiving him. Rebuilding was not a single moment of absolution, but an ongoing process, requiring empathy and patience. Months passed, and Catherine suggested they move from Beverly Hills. While the estate had once symbolized success, it now carried memories of betrayal. She proposed a quieter area, perhaps a ranch on the outskirts of Santa Barbara or a coastal home near Laguna Beach. Jonathan, initially hesitant, realized how significantly the environment shaped their emotional state. They eventually settled on a modern yet cozy house in Montecito, perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. Less glitzy than Beverly Hills, it offered a tranquil environment to raise their children. Henry adapted to the new location swiftly, marveling at the rocky beaches and enjoying a more laid-back routine. Emma giggled in the arms of her parents, oblivious to the turmoil that had almost prevented her from arriving into a stable family. Catherine, still coping with the residual heartbreak, found solace in creating a warm, welcoming home that reflected their new commitment. In Montecito, Jonathan restructured his business approach. The scandal taught him that relentless expansion without ethics or stability was a recipe for catastrophe. He established a philanthropic branch within Green's Wellness, funding community-based fitness and mental health initiatives in underserved regions. Catherine pitched in, using her empathy and organizational skills to spearhead local charity events. Their philanthropic synergy did more than burnish the company's public image. It reminded them both of the deeper reasons they had pursued success in the first place. That year, Jonathan declined multiple invitations to keynote international conferences, prioritizing time at home. He woke early to jog along the coast with Catherine, prepared breakfast for Henry, and played with Emma on a quilt in the living room. Catherine took up painting, a hobby she had abandoned amidst the chaos of high society life. The gentle brushstrokes, capturing Montecito's sunrises and pastoral hills, provided a therapeutic release. Mark Johnson and other old colleagues visited periodically, struck by Jonathan's calmer demeanor. Some teased him about finally learning to slow down. Others expressed relief that scandal no longer overshadowed his philanthropic expansions. Catherine felt the subtle difference too. Jonathan was no longer the restless man scanning phone notifications at dinner. He engaged, listened, and embraced fatherhood wholeheartedly. As time marched on, even tabloids lost interest. The name Bianca Street James no longer appeared in sensational headlines. Instead, articles highlighted Green's wellness philanthropic projects or commented on how Catherine and Jonathan seemed stronger than ever, the couple that overcame heartbreak. Some praised Catherine for her grace under intense scrutiny, while Jonathan garnered cautious admiration for confronting his failings and emerging reformed. In the privacy of their Montecito home, Catherine and Jonathan often spoke candidly. They didn't shy from the memory of Bianca or Jonathan's betrayal. Those wounds, though scarred over, served as a stark reminder of how fragile devotion could be. In acknowledging the darkness, they made space for deeper understanding. A once gilded marriage, overshadowed by routine and ambition, now sparkled with a new authenticity, albeit shaped by struggle. On Emma's first birthday, Catherine and Jonathan organized a small gathering in their new home. Family and trusted friends arrived, celebrating the milestone. A toddler's delight transformed the living room into a sea of pastel balloons and laughter. Henry, now 5, served as a proud older brother, carefully showing Emma how to unwrap her gifts. Catherine's parents drove up from San Diego, tearful yet joyful, to see how far their daughter and son-in-law had come. Mark Johnson flew in from New York, excited to witness a serene, content side of Jonathan that once seemed impossible. Over slices of homemade cake, conversation flowed about how rapidly life can change and how people adapt. Jonathan privately thanked Mark for standing by him despite the scandal's potential to harm the company. Mark responded with paternal warmth, observing that a strong moral compass could guide a person through even the stormiest seas. Catherine, overhearing, felt gratitude wash over her. In a swirl of pink wrapping paper and children's giggles, she thought about how close they had been to losing all of this. Catherine sometimes revisited the swirl of emotions that accompanied her second pregnancy: rage, betrayal, uncertainty about the future. Now, as Emma tottered around the living room in her new shoes, Catherine felt a surge of pride for having mustered the courage to reclaim her life. She recognized her own resilience. She had confronted heartbreak, demanded reforms, and found the strength to protect herself and her children. In a quiet moment that evening, she and Jonathan stood on the balcony. The horizon glowed with a crimson sunset. Catherine gently laced her fingers through his. "Do you ever regret it all?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the fading sun. Jonathan swallowed, recalling the anguish he had wrought. "I regret hurting you," he murmured. "I regret letting greed and vanity blind me. But seeing how we've grown, even with the scars, I know we've built something more real now." Catherine nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. The gentle hum of the ocean waves below carried away some of the lingering ache in her heart. A few months after Emma's birthday, Jonathan surprised Catherine with an idea. They should renew their wedding vows, symbolically embracing a fresh chapter. Catherine hesitated at first, wondering if it was necessary. Ultimately, the concept resonated. They decided on an intimate beach ceremony at dusk, accompanied only by their closest circle. Catherine's mother fashioned a simple floral arch on the sand. Henry walked hand in hand with Emma, scattering rose petals as they giggled at the surf. Mark Johnson stood as Jonathan's best man, while Catherine's best friend, Aria Kinsley, served as maid of honor. When Jonathan recited his vows, tears clouded his vision. He spoke of the mistakes he had made, the lessons learned, and the unwavering hope he held for their shared future. Catherine responded with quiet grace, acknowledging her heartbreak and her choice to forgive, not out of weakness, but out of courage to see what they could become. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they embraced, sealing their commitment with a kiss that tasted of salt air and redemption. In the months that followed, Catherine occasionally encountered passing references to Bianca in the press rumors that she lived in Europe under a different name, or that she might be attempting to rebuild her career in another field. But these mentions were so minor they scarcely ruffled Catherine or Jonathan. Their focus lay on the present, nurturing Emma's blossoming personality, guiding Henry through his early school years, and balancing their philanthropic responsibilities with a cherished family life. Green's wellness shifted towards sustainability and mental health advocacy. Catherine joined the board, championing postpartum support programs and free counseling for disadvantaged mothers. Each time they co-hosted a charity gala, they remembered the misguided extravagance that once fueled Jonathan's ambition. Now, events served a purpose beyond status or networking. They were about giving back, healing, connecting. On weekends, Jonathan turned off his phone and joined Henry on imaginative backyard adventures, forging the father-son bond they had lacked for years. When Emma, age 2, waddled into his lap one morning while Catherine made breakfast, Jonathan felt a contentment he realized he'd never fully experienced in all those years of relentless striving. Here, cradled in daily joys, was a genuine sense of wealth surpassing any transaction or corporate triumph. Every so often, memories of the turbulence threatened to resurface. Catherine would catch Jonathan staring pensively at old photos or reading a snippet of scandal gossip with a distant look. They discussed it openly, refusing to let lingering shame or regret corrode their new foundation. If anything, acknowledging the pain reaffirmed how hard they had fought to stand where they did. It wasn't about erasing the past, but harnessing it as a fulcrum for a more mindful future. Catherine's father once told her, "Forgiveness isn't about pretending the scars don't exist. It's about seeing the scar and choosing to keep living." Indeed, the experience etched permanent marks on their spirits, but it also clarified how easily illusions can tear relationships apart and how unwavering resolve can stitch them together again. Years went by, and Henry entered elementary school as Emma toddled into preschool. Catherine and Jonathan thrived in roles that blended leadership with humility. Jonathan was the CEO who championed ethical expansions. Catherine was a philanthropic director, bridging local communities with Green's wellness. They traveled together more often, sometimes bringing the children along to events. They scaled expansions carefully, ensuring time for family dinners, bedtime stories, and annual vacations. When Henry turned 8, Catherine asked him about his earliest memory. He mentioned snippets of a big house. He barely recalled, some tension he didn't understand. She recognized it as the period she had moved away. Catherine inhaled deeply, relieved that Henry's recollections were largely overshadowed by the stable, loving environment they cultivated after Emma's birth. Periodically, Catherine recalled the initial heartbreak, a swirl of paparazzi, that email with incriminating photos, the nights she sobbed while Henry slept at her mother's. Despite the anguish, she also saw how adversity had become their teacher. She taught Henry and Emma the virtues of honesty and compassion, hoping they would learn from mistakes she and Jonathan once made. Freed from illusions of perfect marital bliss, she embraced the real depth that emerged only after confronting their darkest moment. As Catherine walked along the shoreline with Jonathan one evening, the kids safely tucked in bed, they mused on life's twists. Where once their estate bristled with emptiness, the Montecito home was now filled with children's laughter and the fragrance of baked treats Catherine loved making. Jonathan's phone no longer incessantly buzzed. He valued the hush of the ocean, the briny air, and the simple pleasure of holding hands with the woman he almost lost. Catherine leaned into him, recalling their vow renewal. She asked, "Do you ever worry about us losing track again?" Jonathan tightened his arm around her shoulder. "Not the same way," he whispered. "We know too well where that road leads." They strolled in comfortable silence, aware that while no future was guaranteed, they had forged a partnership capable of weathering storms. The estate in Beverly Hills, where Bianca once roamed, was sold. The proceeds partly funded their philanthropic foundation and partly established college trusts for Henry and Emma. Every now and then, old acquaintances brought up the scandal, referencing it as a cautionary tale about greed and temptation. Catherine and Jonathan never boasted. Instead, they quietly lived out a transformation that had turned betrayal into a fresh chance for authentic devotion. In time, Mark Johnson retired, entrusting part of his investment firm to Jonathan. Younger executives stepped up in Green's wellness, bringing fresh energy. Catherine remained a comforting anchor, ensuring each new initiative aligned with the soul of the business: well-being, empathy, community. In each philanthropic event they organized, people witnessed a synergy formed not by the pursuit of fame, but by an acknowledgement of the power of second chances. As Emma neared 5 and Henry prepared for middle school, the memory of the mistress who nearly wrecked their family seemed distant. Yet Catherine occasionally flipped through an old journal, reading entries from those harrowing days. She revisited the raw heartbreak, uncertain if she had done the right thing by returning. Her journal's last lines from that period read, "I choose love, but never again at the expense of my own dignity." That sentiment encapsulated how their marriage had evolved, love tempered by self-respect and honesty. Jonathan, for his part, remained attuned to Catherine's emotional signals, ensuring he never repeated the behaviors that led him astray. He recognized the privilege of redemption was not something to be squandered. Neighbors in Montecito rarely pried, the community valued privacy, giving them space to exist as a normal family. Sometimes Catherine found it surreal that a near-catastrophic affair turned into an impetus for profound personal and relational growth. But as she tucked Emma into bed, reading bedtime stories about heroes who overcame dragons and curses, she realized life's real villain had been complacency, secrecy, and unchecked ambition. Now, as she watched Jonathan kneel beside her, helping Emma pronounce tricky words, she felt thankful for the journey. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was a testament to resilience, shaped by tears, confessions, therapy sessions, and new beginnings. Ultimately, Catherine understood that real love could endure, provided both partners remained committed to facing the truth even when it was painful. Decades later, the Green family's story would be recounted in local circles as an example of heartbreak turned to triumph. The scandal became a footnote, overshadowed by the philanthropic success of Green's wellness and the lasting positivity. Jonathan and Catherine spread through community work. In the final assessment, Bianca's intrusion had threatened everything. Yet Catherine's return, pregnant and determined, forced truths into the open, setting the stage for sincere transformation. The crisis revealed the cracks in their marriage, but also unleashed the will to rebuild it stronger than ever. Catherine's bravery in demanding respect, Jonathan's willingness to reform, and the impetus of a growing family formed the bedrock of their renewal. The public might have called it a Hollywood drama, but for Jonathan and Catherine, it was simply the story of how a betrayal opened their eyes to the necessity of honesty and love. Each day they awakened, greeted the children, and faced the challenges of life. They bore witness to the resilience that rose from the ashes of heartbreak. Mistress destroyed the millionaire's family? Perhaps. But the pregnant wife's return changed everything, restoring the family's soul and proving that genuine love, once tested, could blaze back even brighter than before. Moments of betrayal can devastate, yet they can also spark the courage to rebuild. Jonathan and Catherine endured heartbreak they never anticipated, propelled by ambition and a deceptive third party who nearly shattered their world. Yet through honest confrontation, painful therapy sessions, and unwavering commitment to their children, they discovered the power of redemption. Old illusions gave way to transparency and renewed devotion. If this journey resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe. By spreading this story, you remind others that survival and growth are possible even in the face of profound betrayal. Let Jonathan and Catherine's transformation become a testament. Real love isn't about perfection, but about confronting darkness, making amends, and standing stronger together. Join us again for more heart-stirring tales that reveal how hope can rise when everything seems lost, lighting a path toward healing for every wounded soul willing to fight for it.
A penthouse overlooking Central Park, a walk-in closet overflowing with Hermes, and a baby on the way. Anya had it all, or so she thought. In the blink of an eye, her billionaire husband, a man who once promised her the world, stood before her, his words colder than the winter wind whipping across their panoramic window. "I want a divorce." But before the ink could dry on the papers, a knock on the door changed everything. His mistress wasn't there to gloat. She was there to expose a secret so dark it would make his demand for a divorce the least of Anya's worries. The scent of blooming peonies and old money filled the air of the penthouse apartment on the 82nd floor of 432 Park Avenue. It was a sterile, curated scent, one that Anya had come to associate with her life, beautiful, expensive, and utterly devoid of the earthy reality she secretly craved. From this height, New York City was a glittering, silent diorama. The yellow cabs were ants, the sprawling green of Central Park, a manicured carpet, and the people, the millions of bustling, striving souls, were entirely insignificant, just like her. Anya traced the rim of her porcelain teacup, the delicate floral pattern a stark contrast to the stark minimalist decor Julian insisted upon. Everything was shades of grey chrome and glass. It was the home of a man who admired his reflections, both literal and financial. He called it uncluttered. Anya called it empty. Her hand drifted down to the gentle swell of her stomach, a 6-month bump that was her only true possession in this sky-high palace. This baby, her baby, was the one vibrant, chaotic, and real thing in her life, It was a secret garden she nurtured within herself, a world away from Julian's meticulous control. Julian Croft. To the world, he was a titan of industry, a visionary in the volatile world of tech mergers and acquisitions. His face, all sharp angles and disarming smiles, graced the covers of Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. He had a Midas touch, turning fledgling startups into billion-dollar unicorns with a flick of his pen. He had swept Anya off her feet 5 years ago. She was a junior art curator, then full of opinions and passion, and he had seemed utterly captivated by her spirit. He'd courted her with the kind of grand cinematic gestures that leave a woman breathless, a private viewing at the Met, a weekend trip to Paris, on a whim a rare first-edition book of poetry she'd once mentioned in passing. He had built a gilded cage for her, and she, dazzled by the shine, had walked right in. She'd given up her small gallery job, her cramped but cozy apartment in the village, and her circle of wonderfully messy artistic friends. Julian had said he wanted to give her the world. She hadn't realized he meant he wanted to become her entire world. The sound of the private elevator chiming its arrival pulled her from her reverie. Julian was home. Early. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach, a feeling that had become increasingly familiar over the past few months. He strode into the living area, looking every inch the master of the universe. His bespoke Tom Ford suit clung perfectly to his athletic frame, his dark hair was impeccably styled, and his face held the neutral, unreadable expression he reserved for high-stakes negotiations. He didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the panoramic view, as if calculating its net worth. Julian Anya began, her voice softer than she intended. "You're home. I was just about to have the chef start on dinner." He turned then, and the coldness in his eyes extinguished the small flicker of hope in her chest. There was no warmth, no flicker of recognition for his pregnant wife. It was the look he gave a line item on a balance sheet that was underperforming. "Don't bother," he said, his voice flat and clipped. He walked over to the marble bar and poured himself a whiskey, the clink of the decanter against the glass unnaturally loud in the silent room. "We need to talk, Anya." Anya's hand instinctively went back to her belly, a protective gesture. "Is everything all right? Did the deal with the Japanese consortium fall through?" She tried to grasp for a familiar topic, a corner of his life she was still permitted to understand. He took a long swallow of his drink, his throat bobbing. "The deal is fine. Everything in my life is perfectly aligned. Except this." He gestured vaguely between them, an all-encompassing wave that dismissed their 5 years of marriage. Their shared bed, the child growing inside her. This, she whispered, her heart beginning to hammer against her ribs. This marriage, he stated, turning to face her fully. His face was a mask of detached finality. "It's run its course. It no longer serves its purpose. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, sharp and deadly, like shards of glass from the panoramic window he so admired. Anya felt the blood drain from her face. She must have misheard. This was Julian's idea of a joke, a cruel, power-playing jest to see her squirm. "A divorce," she stammered, a hysterical little laugh escaping her lips. "Julian, what are you talking about?" "I'm pregnant. We're having a baby." "I'm aware of the child's existence," he said, his voice laced with an icy patience that was more terrifying than any shout. "My lawyers have already been instructed to be generous. A trust will be established for the child. You will be provided with a settlement that will allow you to live very comfortably. A nice apartment, a staff, whatever you need. You will want for nothing materially. Materially." The word was an insult, a deliberate reduction of her life, her love, her very being to a transaction. The man who had once quoted poetry to her was now liquidating her like a bad asset. "I don't want a settlement, Julian. I want my husband. I want the father of my child." Her voice cracked the carefully constructed composure of the perfect wife, shattering into a million pieces. Tears streamed down her face, hot and furious. "What has happened to you? What has happened to us? Nothing has happened," he insisted, his calm unwavering. He was a stone wall, impervious to her pain. "This was always a contract, Anya. An arrangement. You provided beauty, social grace, a certain aesthetic. I provided a lifestyle beyond your wildest dreams. The contract is now being terminated." "A contract?" She stared at him aghast. The last 5 years replayed in her mind, now tainted and twisted by his cruel words. Every shared laugh, every tender touch, every whispered promise now felt like a lie, a performance. She felt a wave of nausea so profound it had nothing to do with her pregnancy. She had been a fool, a beautiful, well-kept, blind fool. There's someone else, isn't there? The question was a classic, a cliché she never thought she'd utter. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed his face. Not guilt, but a flicker of annoyance, as if she were a fly buzzing around his head. "That's irrelevant to the situation." "Irrelevant?" she cried, her voice rising. "You're throwing me out pregnant with your child, and you tell me your mistress is irrelevant. Who is she, Julian?" He walked over to the sleek obsidian desk in the corner and pulled a thick document from a leather briefcase. He tossed it onto the glass coffee table between them. The sound was a final, definitive thud. "These are the divorce papers," he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. "My lawyers advise you to sign them without contest. A prolonged, messy battle will not be beneficial for you, or for the public's perception of you. I have a reputation to maintain." He was threatening her. He was threatening to paint her as a gold digger, a shrew, to drag her name through the mud, while he stood pristine on his mountain of money. The cruelty was breathtaking. He wasn't just ending their marriage. He was trying to erase her, to control the very narrative of her existence, even as he expelled her from his. She looked from the papers to his cold, handsome face. The man she loved, or the man she thought she loved, was gone. In his place stood a monster, a creature of pure, unadulterated avarice and ego. A profound, chilling clarity washed over her. The shock receded, replaced by a nascent, unfamiliar anger. "No," she said, her voice trembling, but firm. Julian raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "No, no. I will not sign these. I will not be discarded like one of your failed investments." "This child," she said, her hand protectively cradling her belly, "deserves a father. And I deserve an explanation. A real one." Julian's jaw tightened. He was not used to being told no. The air crackled with his silent fury. He took a step towards her, his physical presence suddenly feeling overwhelming, threatening. "You are making a grave mistake, Anya," he hissed. "You have no idea what you're messing with. You have no idea the forces at play here. Sign the papers. Take the money. Disappear quietly. It's the best option for everyone." His words held a hidden weight, a darker undercurrent that went beyond a simple sordid affair. The forces at play here. It wasn't the plea of a man in love with someone else. It was a warning, a threat. Before Anya could respond, before she could decipher the strange, panicked glint in his eyes, the chime of the private elevator echoed through the penthouse once more. Both their heads snapped towards the sound. Julian's face for the first time that evening lost its composure. A flash of pure, unadulterated panic crossed his features so quick that Anya almost missed it. He looked trapped. "Who is that?" Anya asked, her own confusion mounting. They weren't expecting anyone. Julian guarded their privacy with a zeal that bordered on paranoid. "Don't." Julian breathed his eyes wide as he stared at the elevator doors. It wasn't a command to Anya, but a desperate plea to the universe. The polished steel doors slid open with a soft, expensive sigh. Standing in the doorway was a woman. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with raven black hair cut into a sharp, severe bob, and eyes the color of emeralds. She wore a crimson dress that clung to her like a second skin, a stark, bloody slash of color in the monochrome world of Julian's penthouse. Anya's heart stopped. It had to be her. The mistress. She had come to gloat, to witness the final destruction of the wife to claim her prize. Anya braced herself for the humiliation, the final crushing blow. But the woman's eyes weren't on Anya. They were locked on Julian, and they held no trace of triumph. Her beautiful face was pale. Her hands were trembling, and her emerald eyes were wide with a terror that mirrored the panic on Julian's face. She took a shaky step into the room. "Julian," the woman, said, her voice a ragged whisper that cut through the silence. "It's over. They know. They know everything." Julian stared at her, his mask of control utterly shattered. He looked like a man staring at his own ghost. Anya looked back and forth between her husband and this beautiful, terrified stranger. A cold dread far deeper and more terrifying than the pain of betrayal began to creep up her spine. This wasn't about a simple affair. Julian's strange warning, his panic, this woman's fear, it was all connected to something far bigger. The divorce papers lay on the table, forgotten. The gilded cage had just burst open, but Anya had a sickening feeling that she hadn't been set free. She had just been tossed into the fire. The woman in the crimson dress took another hesitant step into the cavernous living room. Her designer heels, which should have clicked with authority on the polished marble floor, were instead unnervingly silent, as if she were trying to retract her own presence. Anya's mind, still reeling from the whiplash of the divorce demand, struggled to process this new bizarre tableau. The mistress, for who else could she be, wasn't acting like a victor. She was acting like a fugitive. "Isabel, what the hell are you doing here?" Julian finally managed to say, his voice a strangled rasp. He shot a venomous glare at her, a look that was less about a spurned lover and more about a co-conspirator who had broken rank. He moved almost unconsciously to position himself between Isabel and Anya, a futile attempt to control the flow of information. "I tried to call you Isabel," said her voice, trembling. She ignored Anya completely, her gaze fixed on Julian's increasingly frantic expression. "Your phone was off. I left a dozen messages with your secretary. I had to come. We don't have any time." "Time for what?" Anya interjected, her voice finding a new steely edge. The initial shock was beginning to curdle into suspicion. "Time to coordinate your stories before you throw me out." Isabel's head snapped towards Anya, and for the first time she seemed to truly see her. There was no malice in her emerald eyes, no smug superiority. Instead, Anya saw a flicker of something that looked unnervingly like pity. It was an expression that infuriated Anya more than any taunt could have. "This has nothing to do with your marriage," Isabel said, with a dismissive wave of her hand that was so absolute it was chilling. "That's just collateral damage. A loose end he was trying to tie up." A loose end. Anya repeated the words, tasting like ash. She looked at Julian, whose face was now a ghastly shade of pale. "Is that what I am to you, Julian? A loose end?" "Shut up!" Isabel Julian roared, finally losing the last vestige of his icy control. He lunged towards her, grabbing her arm. "You shouldn't be here. We had a plan. The plan is shot to hell." "Julian." Isabel wrenched her arm free, her fear momentarily eclipsed by a surge of anger. The plan went up in smoke the moment my brother's name appeared on the SEC's inquiry list this morning. The acronym hung in the air, SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. The federal agency that policed Wall Street, the boogeyman of every high-flying financier. It was a name Anya knew from the headlines from the periphery of Julian's world, but it had never felt real, never had any bearing on her curated life. Until now. What SEC inquiry Anya demanded, stepping forward. She was no longer just a passive victim in a domestic drama. She was an unwilling participant in something far more sinister. "Julian, what is she talking about?" "She's talking nonsense." Julian spat, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route that didn't exist 82 floors in the sky. "She's hysterical. Her brother made some bad investments, and now she's panicking and trying to drag me into it. He was trying to rebuild his wall of composure, but the cracks were showing. His hands were trembling, and a thin sheen of sweat had broken out on his forehead. Bad investments." Isabel let out a sharp, bitter laugh that held no humor. "Is that what you call it? You used him. Julian, you used my family's brokerage firm as a shield. You ran the entire scheme through their accounts. Made them look like the masterminds while you stayed clean. Scheme." The word was a poison dart. Anya's gaze swung back to Julian. His entire empire, his Midas touch, was it all just a trick? A lie, just like their marriage? "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice low and threatening as he took a step towards Isabel. "And I suggest you leave now before you say something you'll regret." "No." Isabel stood her ground, her chin held high. The fear was still there, but it was now bolstered by a desperate, cornered resolve. "I'm not taking the fall for you. My brother is not going to prison for you. I loved you, Julian, or I thought I did. But I see what you are now. You don't love anyone. You consume them. You use them up, and then you discard the husk." Her eyes flickered to Anya. "She knows." "Don't you?" Anya thought back. The last 6 months, Julian's increasing secrecy, his late nights at the office, which she had assumed were due to his affair, the strange hushed phone calls he would take in his study, ending them abruptly if she walked in, the way he had systematically isolated her, severing her ties to her old friends, even discouraging visits from her own family, claiming he wanted to protect her peace and privacy during her pregnancy. It hadn't been about protecting her. It had been about isolating a witness. What scheme, Julian Anya's voice was dangerously quiet. The tears were gone. In their place was a cold, terrifying calm. "What did you do?" "Anya, listen to me," Julian said, turning to her, his voice attempting a gentleness that now sounded grotesque and manipulative. She's a scorned woman. She's trying to ruin me because I ended our affair. It's the oldest story in the book. You're my wife. You're the mother of my child. It's you I'm trying to protect." He was trying to play her to use their shared history and their unborn child as a shield. But the spell was broken. She could see the puppeteer's strings. "Protect," she repeated, her voice dripping with scorn. "By demanding a divorce an hour ago, by calling me a loose end, you needed to tie up. You weren't trying to protect me. You were trying to cut me loose before the ship sank, weren't you? You wanted to make sure I couldn't claim a single cent of your precious, dirty money when it all came crashing down." The truth of it hit her with the force of a physical blow. The divorce wasn't about his love for Isabel. It was a calculated financial maneuver. A preemptive strike in a war he knew was coming. He was willing to make his own pregnant wife a refugee from his life to save himself. "It's called a SPAC," Isabel said. Suddenly, her voice sharp and clear. She was no longer speaking just to Julian, but to Anya, to the room, to the universe. She was confessing. A special purpose acquisition company. It's the cleanest grift on Wall Street right now. Anya had heard Julian talk about SPACs. He'd called them blank check companies, a faster, more efficient way to take a private company, public bypassing the rigorous scrutiny of a traditional IPO. He had launched 3 of them in the last 2 years, raising billions from investors eager to get in on the ground floor of his next big thing. The media had lauded him as an innovator. Your husband, Isabel, continued, her voice gaining a morbid momentum, is a master at selling dreams. He would launch a SPAC, promising to merge it with a revolutionary tech company. The hype alone would send the stock soaring. Investors from massive hedge funds to ordinary people would pour their life savings into it all, based on his reputation. She paused, taking a shaky breath. But there was no company, Anya. There was never any revolutionary tech. It was all smoke and mirrors. A shell game. Julian lunged for her again. "You're lying, am I?" Isabel sidestepped him, her eyes burning with a righteous fury. "Tell her about Project Chimera, Julian. Tell her about the next-gen AI integration platform that was going to change the world. Show her the fancy prospectus, the one with the fabricated data and the photoshopped pictures of a non-existent office in Silicon Valley." She turned back to Anya, her voice dropping. "The money from the investors. It wasn't used for acquisitions. It was funneled, laundered through a complex web of offshore accounts and shell corporations, one of which was my brother's unwitting firm. Julian would skim off hundreds of millions, paying off early investors with money from new ones to keep the illusion going. It's a classic Ponzi scheme, Anya just dressed up in a fancy Wall Street suit. And the whole thing is about to collapse." Anya stared at Julian, waiting for him to deny it, to rage, to offer some plausible explanation. But he said nothing. He simply stood there, breathing heavily, the cornered animal, the master of the universe, brought low by a single unraveling thread. The entire foundation of her life, the penthouse, the clothes, the art, the security was not just built on lies, but on theft, on the stolen dreams and life savings of countless unknown people. She felt a dizzying vertigo, the floor seeming to drop away beneath her. Her hand flew to her stomach, to the one pure thing in this world of deceit. This child, her son or daughter, was heir to a fortune that didn't exist, a legacy of shame. So the divorce. Anya trailed off, the full, monstrous picture becoming clear. The settlement you offered me, that generous trust for our little child. Where was that money coming from, Julian? He finally looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the dark, terrifying truth. It's the last of the clean money, isn't it? She whispered in horror. The money you had before all this started. You were trying to firewall it, to put it in my name and the baby's name so the SEC couldn't touch it when they came for the rest. You weren't giving me a gift. You were using your pregnant wife and your unborn child as a money mule. The silence that followed was a confession. It was the most damning sound Anya had ever heard. The man she had married was not just a cheat or a liar. He was a predator of the highest order, and he had just tried to make her his final accomplice. The doorbell chimed, not the private elevator this time, but the main service door to the apartment. A loud, insistent official buzzing. It was a sound none of them could ignore. Julian, Isabel, and Anya all froze, their three-person drama instantly rendered insignificant. This was no longer a private implosion. The outside world was knocking. Julian's eyes, wide with terror, met Anya's. The last shred of his bravado was gone, replaced by the primal fear of a man whose time had run out. The buzzing came again, longer this time, more demanding. "Don't answer it," Julian whispered, a desperate, futile command. But Anya was already walking towards the door. The fog of her shock and betrayal was beginning to clear, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She had been a pawn in his game for far too long. The game was over. Her hand closed around the cold steel handle of the door. Whatever was on the other side, it was the beginning of her new reality. She had to face it, for herself and for the child she carried. She pulled the door open. Standing in the hallway were two men in dark, conservative suits. They were nondescript, their faces impassive, but they carried an aura of unshakable authority that made the air in the multi-million-dollar penthouse feel cheap and thin. One of them held up a badge and an official-looking document. Julian Croft, the lead agent, asked, his voice calm and professional, but with an underlying steel that tolerated no argument. His eyes flicked past Anya to where Julian stood frozen in the middle of the living room. "I'm Agent Miller with the FBI. We have a warrant to search these premises." The FBI. The letters seemed to suck all the remaining oxygen out of the room. It was one thing to hear the acronym SEC from a panicked Mistress. It was another to see the flesh and blood embodiment of a federal investigation standing on your doorstep. Julian looked as if he had been turned to stone. The blood had drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy grey pallor. He stared at the agents, his mouth slightly agape. The master manipulator suddenly a speechless puppet. Isabel let out a small, choked sob and sank onto one of the ridiculously expensive minimalist sofas, her crimson dress pooling around her like a stain. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by the grim resignation of someone who had pulled the pin on a grenade and was now simply waiting for the blast. Agent Miller and his partner stepped into the apartment, their sensible shoes making solid, real-world sounds on the marble floor. Anya stepped back, a strange sense of detachment washing over her. She was watching a movie of her own life imploding. The agent's eyes swept the room, cataloguing the art, the furniture, the view, not with admiration, but with the cold appraisal of an asset seizure. "We also have a warrant for your arrest." "Mr. Croft." Agent Miller continued in the same dispassionate tone, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "For conspiracy to commit securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering." The words were a death sentence, a formal indictment of everything Isabel had just revealed. The Ponzi scheme project Chimera. The stolen money, it was all real. And now the consequences were real too. "This is a mistake," Julian finally stammered, his voice weak and unconvincing. "My lawyers. Your lawyers have been notified." Agent Miller cut him off smoothly. "They can meet you downtown. Please place your hands behind your back." The sight of Julian Croft, the titan of Wall Street, the man whose confident smirk had sold billions in fraudulent dreams, being handcuffed in his own living room, was surreal. The metallic click of the cuffs locking into place was the final definitive sound of his world ending. He didn't resist. The fight was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed shock. As the second agent began to lead Julian towards the door, Isabel suddenly stood up, her face streaked with tears, but her voice filled with a new urgent terror. "Wait!" she cried out, her voice sharp. "That's not all. That's not the real reason." Agent Miller paused, turning to her with a look of mild professional interest. "The real reason for what, ma'am?" "For the divorce," she said, pointing a trembling finger at Julian. "For why he had to get her out. It's not just about the money. There's something else. Something worse." Anya, who had been standing silently by the wall, felt a new wave of ice-cold dread. Worse. What could possibly be worse than a billion-dollar fraud that had ruined countless lives? What was the dark secret that even a massive financial crime was meant to cover up? Julian's head snapped up. He shot a look at Isabel, a look of pure murderous rage mixed with desperate pleading. "Isabel, no. Don't. I have to," she sobbed. "They need to know everything. They need to know why you were so desperate." She turned to the agents, her words tumbling out in a frantic, disjointed rush. "The SPACs. The fraud. That was the end game. But it started somewhere else. It started with his first company. Gen Tech Solutions. Anya vaguely remembered the name. It was the company Julian had founded before they met the one that had given him his initial millions and launched his reputation as a tech prodigy. He had sold it for a massive profit years ago. "What about it?" Agent Miller asked, his patience clearly wearing thin. Gentech's flagship product was a proprietary data encryption software, Isabel explained, her voice gaining clarity as she forced the story out. It was sold to dozens of high-level corporate clients, banks, law firms, private equity funds. They promised impenetrable security. She took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto Anya's. The pity was back in her gaze, but now it was deeper, darker, filled with a horror that Anya couldn't yet comprehend. But it wasn't an encryption software, Anya. It was a key. Julian built a back door into the system, a master key that gave him access to everything. For years he had a live feed into the most sensitive corporate data in the country. Mergers and acquisitions plans, confidential legal strategies, insider trading information. The scale of it was dizzying. Julian hadn't just been a con artist. He had been a digital phantom, a ghost in the machine systematically stealing the lifeblood of the corporate world. That's how he made his first fortune. Isabel continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. It wasn't genius. It was theft on an industrial scale. He knew which companies were going to be acquired before they did. He knew which stocks would soar and which would plummet. He wasn't predicting the market. He was reading the script. The agents exchanged a look. This was new information. This went beyond the SPACs. This was the origin story of his entire criminal enterprise. But that's still not the secret. Isabel choked out tears, streaming down her face again. That's just more fraud. Then what is it? Anya finally spoke, her voice a hollow echo in the room. She had to know. She had to know the final, terrible truth that was poisoning the very air she breathed. Isabel's gaze was fixed on Anya's pregnant belly. 2 years ago, one of the companies he was spying on, a pharmaceutical firm called Biovance, they were on the verge of a major breakthrough, a revolutionary new gene therapy treatment. But they had a problem. Their final human trials were showing some irregularities, dangerous side effects that they were trying to solve before announcing the drug. Julian was now shaking his head violently, his muffled pleas ignored by the agent holding him. "Don't say it, Isabel. Please." Julian knew the drug was flawed. Isabel forged on her voice, cracking with the weight of her confession. He had access to the raw, hidden data. He knew it was dangerous. But he also knew that if another company acquired Biovance, before the flaws were public, the stock would triple overnight. So he used his insider information. He leaked the news of the potential breakthrough without mentioning the dangerous side effects to a rival corporation. They initiated a hostile takeover, and Julian, having bought millions in Biovance stock beforehand, made a fortune. Over $200 million in a single week. That's insider trading. A huge case, but Agent Miller prompted. But it wasn't just insider trading. Isabel screamed, the sound raw and agonizing. The new company, eager to recoup their investment, rushed the drug to market. They buried the flawed data. They pushed it through a compromised approval process. The drug was called Viridia. Anya's blood ran cold. Viridia. The name was a lightning bolt, a searing brand on her memory. It was prescribed as an advanced fertility treatment. Isabel whispered, her eyes locked on Anya's. For couples who had tried everything else, it was hailed as a miracle drug. Anya's hand, the one not pressed against her stomach, flew to her mouth. No, it couldn't be. The room began to spin. The minimalist grey walls seemed to close in on her. She and Julian had struggled to conceive. For 2 years they had been through a heart-breaking cycle of hope and disappointment. Doctors had found no specific issue, just unexplained infertility. Then a year ago, a new specialist, a top doctor recommended by Julian himself, had suggested a new cutting-edge treatment. A miracle drug from Europe, he had called it. Its name was Viridia. Anya stared at Julian, at the man she had married, the man whose child she was carrying. The man who had looked on with what she thought was shared joy when the pregnancy test finally came back positive. But it hadn't been joy. It had been the culmination of a monstrous plan. The side effects, Anya could barely form the words. Her throat was tight with terror. What were the side effects? Julian finally broke. A guttural, animalistic sob tore from his chest. Anya, I'm sorry. I can fix it. We have money. The best doctors. Isabel gave the final brutal answer, her voice devoid of all emotion, a flat line of horror. It worked. The drug allowed women to conceive. That part was true. But the hidden data from the original trials showed that in nearly 80% of cases, the fetus would develop a rare and fatal neurological disorder. Most didn't survive the 3rd trimester. Those who were born didn't live past their 1st year. The world went silent. The agents, the handcuffs, the penthouse, it all dissolved into an indistinct blur. The only thing that was real was the life kicking inside her. A life she had craved, a life she had celebrated, a life that had been conceived through a monstrous lie, a poison given to her by the man she loved. This was the dark secret. The divorce wasn't about protecting his money. It was about severing all ties before his child was born with the fatal condition he himself had knowingly unleashed upon the world. He wasn't trying to disown a wife. He was trying to outrun a death sentence. He was trying to erase the ultimate evidence of his crime, his own dying child. Anya looked at her husband, the father of her child, the architect of her destruction. He was no longer a man. He was a void, a black hole of greed and ambition that had consumed everything, including the life of his own unborn baby. The strength drained from her legs. The room tilted violently, the glittering view of Central Park spinning into a nauseating vortex. As her knees buckled and the world faded to black, the last thing she heard was the distant hollow sound of her own scream. Anya awoke to a world bleached of all color. The first sensation was not sight, but smell. A sharp, aggressive scent of antiseptic that scoured her nostrils and bore no resemblance to the curated peony and old money fragrance of her former life. The second was sound, the soft, insistent, and terrifyingly rhythmic beep of a machine somewhere to her left. For a fleeting, merciful moment, she was adrift in a sea of disorientation, the horrors of the previous evening feeling like the suffocating remnants of a fever dream. Had it been real? The cold words, the crimson dress, the click of handcuffs. Then, with the force of a physical impact, the memories crashed back in. Viridia. The name detonated in her mind a single word that contained a universe of betrayal. It was the name of the drug. The poison, the monstrous lie she had welcomed into her body. A raw, guttural sob tore itself from her throat, and her hand, trembling uncontrollably, flew to her stomach. The gentle, reassuring swell was still there, a fragile vessel in a venomous sea. Was her baby the one pure thing she had left already a ghost? Easy now, Mrs. Croft. Take a deep breath. A calm, steady voice pierced through the fog of her panic. A woman in navy blue scrubs her face, a welcome portrait of professional kindness, was adjusting the IV drip in Anya's arm. You fainted. We brought you straight to Lenox Hill Hospital. We've been monitoring you and the baby. The baby, Anya's voice, was a ragged whisper, a thread of sound in the cavernous silence of her fear. She couldn't bring herself to ask the real question, the one that clawed at the inside of her skull. Is it dying? The nurse's eyes softened with understanding. The baby is fine, she said, her words deliberate and clear. A little stressed when you were brought in, but the heartbeat is strong and steady now. Your own heart rate is elevated, which is understandable. You've had a severe shock. The baby is strong. 4 simple words. They were not a cure, not a promise, but they were a lifeline. In the raging flood of her shattered reality, Anya clung to them as if they were the last solid ground on earth. Her baby was a fighter. It was already more than its father had ever been. I need to see a doctor, Anya managed, pushing herself up slightly. The effort made the room spin. A specialist, not just an OB, a geneticist, someone who understands. I need to know everything. Her voice broke on the last word. She needed to know the shape of the monster she was facing. We've already paged the head of our maternal fetal medicine department, Dr. Elena Ramirez. The nurse reassured her, fluffing a thin pillow behind her head. She's the best. She'll be here to speak with you shortly. For now, just try to breathe. Rest was an impossible luxury. Her mind was a torture chamber, replaying Julian's face, twisting in panic, the cold finality of the FBI agent's voice, and Isabel's horrified confession over and over. The entire architecture of her life, a magnificent structure she had once admired, had been revealed as a criminal enterprise, a house of cards built on stolen dreams. And the final, most intimate, most unspeakable betrayal was swimming in her very womb, conceived from a miracle that was in truth a time bomb. As the nurse left to give her a moment, another figure appeared hesitantly in the doorway. It was Isabel. She had shed the blood-red dress, the armor of Julian's mistress, and now wore a simple, anonymous pair of jeans and a grey sweater. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing the faint purple smudges of exhaustion beneath her eyes. The emerald fire in her irises had been banked, leaving a weary, sorrowful glow. Anya's body tensed. A primal part of her wanted to scream at this woman, the beautiful harbinger of her apocalypse. But the anger felt distant, a secondary emotion, muted by the all-consuming terror of Julian's ultimate sin. Isabel wasn't the enemy. She was just another piece of scorched debris in the blast radius of Julian Croft. "What do you want?" Anya asked, her voice raspy, devoid of accusation, but heavy with exhaustion. I came to see if you were all right," Isabel said, her voice barely a whisper. She hovered by the door, a respectful distance away, as if acknowledging she was trespassing on sacred ground of grief. "And to tell you, I told them everything." Anya remained silent, watching her. "The agents at the penthouse," Isabel clarified, twisting a loose thread on her sweater. "After they took you, I stayed for hours. I told them about Viridia, about the Bio-Vance data, about Julian's back door into Gentech. I gave them the offshore account numbers he'd bragged about, the server locations he thought were hidden. Everything I knew. My brother is working with them too. He's turning over every record from his firm. He's terrified, but he wants to make it right." Why Anya's question was genuine, a flicker of curiosity in the darkness. Why not just disappear? He would have given you money to run. Isabel finally met her gaze, and Anya saw the profound depth of her self-loathing. Because he was going to let my brother, my family, take the fall for a crime he masterminded. That was the first crack in the fantasy. But the moment I found out about Viridia, the real truth of it, I looked at him, Julian, the man I thought I loved, and I saw a void. It wasn't just greed, Anya. What kind of person knowingly condemns unborn children for profit? It was a level of evil I couldn't comprehend. Her eyes flickered to Anya's stomach. When he told me he was divorcing you, I knew why. He was running from the evidence, from his own child. And I knew you were pregnant, but I didn't know about the drug. Not until my brother's lawyer uncovered the connection. The thought of you, going through the rest of your pregnancy celebrating only to face that. She shook her head, a tear tracing a path down her pale cheek. I couldn't live with myself. I couldn't let you be the last one to know the truth. It was the only thing I could do to claw back a single shred of my own soul. In that moment, Anya saw past the affair, past the label of mistress. She saw another woman who had been utterly conned, another life consumed by Julian's insatiable ego. They were bound by a strange, twisted sisterhood forged in the fires of his spectacular spectacular destruction. They've frozen everything. Isabel added her voice, flat and emotionless. Every asset. The penthouse is a federal crime scene. The accounts are locked. The cars, the art, the watches, it's all gone. Evidence in the largest fraud case in a decade. His lawyers are saying the evidence is insurmountable. He'll never see the outside of a prison cell again. Good, a cold, hard part of Anya thought. Let him rot. But the satisfaction was hollow, a fleeting warmth in an Arctic landscape of pain. Julian's imprisonment couldn't reverse time, couldn't purify the poison. The door opened again, and a woman with intelligent, compassionate eyes and an air of calm authority entered the room. Mrs. Croft. I'm Dr. Ramirez. With a final lingering look of profound regret, Isabel quietly slipped out of the room, leaving Anya to face her new reality. The next hour was a clinical, terrifying blur of medical terminology, consent forms, and agonizing questions. Dr. Ramirez was a miracle of empathy and professionalism. She explained the process for an advanced diagnostic amniocentesis, carefully and patiently outlining the procedure, the risks, and the stark reality of the potential results. She didn't offer false hope, only facts. And for that, Anya was grateful. I have to know, Dr. Anya pleaded, her composure finally crumbling under the clinical weight of it all. Whatever it is, I have to know what I'm facing. We will get you answers, Doctor. Ramirez promised, her hand briefly resting on Anya's arm. The simple human touch was grounding. As quickly and as safely as we possibly can. The days that followed were a unique form of purgatory. Anya remained in the hospital, a voluntary prisoner in a sterile white room, while the world outside feasted on the carcass of her old life. The news of Julian's arrest had gone supernova. Wall Street Wunderkind, or Ponzi King, screamed the cable news chyrons. His smug, handsome face was plastered everywhere, the poster boy for catastrophic hubris. The stories detailed the SPAC's fraud in lurid detail, but the darkest secret, the corporate evil of Viridia, remained a tightly sealed component of the federal case, a horror not yet fit for public consumption. Anya refused all visitors, save for her parents, who flew in immediately, their faces etched with a pain that mirrored her own. She hired a team of lawyers, not to fight for a share of Julian's blood money, but to meticulously expunge him from her life. To dissolve the marriage, to legally and financially firewall her child from the toxic Croft name and its indelible legacy of shame. She existed in a state of suspended animation, the week-long wait for the test results, stretching into an eternity. She didn't sleep, she merely drifted in and out of consciousness. In her waking hours, she would stare out the window at the city, a city that now seemed alien to her. Every pregnant woman she saw, every baby in a stroller was a stab to the heart. She was suspended between a life that was over and a future that was too terrifying to contemplate. Finally, the day came. Dr. Ramirez entered her room alone, closing the door softly behind her. She held a file, and her expression was calm, professional, and utterly unreadable. Anya's heart began to pound, a frantic, desperate rhythm against her ribs. This was it, the precipice. She gripped her own hands over her belly, a protective gesture that felt painfully inadequate. Dr. Ramirez sat in the chair beside the bed, opened the file but didn't look at it. She looked directly at Anya. We have the results from the full genomic sequencing panel, she said, her voice even. Anya held her breath, bracing for the impact, for the words that would shatter the final fragments of her world. Dr. Ramirez took a slow, deliberate breath. Anya, your baby is perfectly healthy. The words didn't register. They were a language she had forgotten how to speak. Anya just stared at her, her mind a blank slate of incomprehension. What? No. That's not possible. Viridia, the neurological degradation. I know, the doctor said gently, her professional calm finally breaking into a warm, reassuring smile. We read the federal case files your lawyers managed to get unsealed for us. We knew the exact rare genetic markers we were looking for, and they are not there. We ran the test twice to be certain. He is completely, unequivocally unaffected. He. Her mind snagged on the word. He. You're having a son. Anya Dr. Ramirez confirmed, her eyes shining. A healthy baby boy. The dam broke. A sound, a wail that was equal parts grief and joy, tore from deep inside her. It was the sound of a week of terror, of months of unknowing, of a lifetime of betrayal, being washed away by a single miraculous wave of relief. The tears came, then hot and cleansing, pouring down her face as she finally truly let go. But how she sobbed, her body shaking. Isabel said, 80%. 80% is not 100%, the doctor said, softly, her voice thick with emotion. It means 20%, 1 in 5 were spared. It's a game of Russian roulette, played with the most precious stakes imaginable. It's a monstrous, unforgivable gamble. But Anya, you and your son, you won. She won. It wasn't a victory over Julian. It was a victory over fate, over poison, over the darkness that had tried to claim her future. Anya checked out of the hospital the next morning. The world looked different, the colors more vibrant, the air cleaner. The Julian Croft penthouse on Park Avenue was sealed a monument to a dead life. She walked away from it without a backward glance. With a small, life-saving loan from her parents, she found a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn's Park Slope. It was a world away from the silent, sterile grandeur she had known. From her window, she saw not a curated park, but a living one. She could hear the joyful shrieks of children playing, the friendly bark of dogs, the distant, reassuring rumble of the F-train. It was the chaotic, beautiful symphony of real life. She spent the final peaceful months of her pregnancy rebuilding. She bought a second-hand crib and painted the nursery a cheerful, sunny yellow. She reconnected with her old circle of wonderfully messy, artistic friends who enveloped her in a cocoon of unconditional love and support, never once mentioning her notorious past. They brought her soup, helped her assemble furniture, and made her laugh, truly laugh for the first time in years. 3 months later, Leo Alexander was born, weighing 7 pounds 2 ounces. He was loud, demanding, and utterly perfect. He had her eyes and a stubborn tuft of dark hair. Holding him for the first time, skin to skin, feeling his tiny, fragile fingers instinctively curl around hers, Anya felt a love so vast and powerful it rearranged her entire universe. This was real wealth. This was a legacy. One rainy afternoon as a 2-week-old, Leo slept soundly on her chest. A news alert popped up on her phone. Julian Croft sentenced. She read that faced with an avalanche of evidence, and Isabel's unshakable testimony, he had accepted a plea bargain to avoid having the full horrific details of the Viridia scandal made public in a trial. He was sentenced to 150 years in a federal supermax facility with no possibility of parole. Anya looked down at her sleeping son, his chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. She felt no hatred for Julian, no desire for revenge. She felt nothing at all. He was a ghost, the antagonist of a story that was already over. Her story and Leo's was just beginning. Her life was no longer defined by the man she had lost, but by the son she had almost lost, and had miraculously gained. She was not the millionaire's disgraced wife. She was Leo's mother, and in the quiet, sun-drenched world of her small Brooklyn apartment, she was the richest woman in the world. Anya's story is a harrowing journey from a gilded cage to true freedom. It's a reminder that wealth can be a mask for unimaginable darkness, and that true strength isn't found in penthouses or designer clothes, but in the fierce, unyielding power of a mother's love. She lost a life of luxury, but gained a life of purpose, proving that even after the most devastating betrayals, we have the power to rise from the ashes and build a new world for ourselves and for our children. Her story isn't just about the downfall of a wicked man, but the rise of an unbreakable woman. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of drama resilience and ultimate justice. Let us know in the comments what you think of Anya's incredible journey.